Madam Speaker, I rise to lay on the table report number HR 300/1/13, report from the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee on the Law Revision and Law Reform Bill 2024. Thank you.
Honourable members, that report is ordered to lie on the table. I recognize the Honourable Chairperson of the Public Service, Labour, Industry and Trade Committee.
Madam Speaker, I rise to lay on the table report number HR 301/1/13, report from the Public Service, Labour, Industry and Trade Committee on the National Health Insurance Authority Bill 2024. Thank you.
Honourable members, that report is ordered to lie on the table.
Questions to ministers.
Honourable members, we have 3 questions to ministers on the agenda. Since the mover of the questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, is not present in the chamber, those questions will now be addressed in writing. Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
I recognize the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Natural Resources.
Madam Speaker, this is the Fiscal Incentives Amendment Bill 2025. I rise to introduce a bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentives Act number 4 of 2023 to allow registered cooperative societies to be eligible to receive fiscal incentives and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Honourable members, that bill is referred to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for examination, consideration and report.
Bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentives Act, Act number 4 of 2023, to allow registered cooperative societies to be eligible to receive fiscal incentives and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order number 49-1, I move that the bill be taken through all its stages forthwith.
Honourable members, the question is that the next stages of the bill be taken forthwith. All those in favour kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the Stamp Duties Amendment Bill 2025. I rise to introduce a bill for an act to make clarifying amendments to the Stamp Duties Act, Chapter 64 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. This bill, Madam Speaker, this bill has the recommendation of the Cabinet.
Honourable members, that bill is referred to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for examination, consideration and report.
Bill for an act to amend or to make clarifying amendments to the Stamp Duties Act, Chapter 64 of the Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order number 49-1, I move that the bill be taken through all its stages forthwith.
Honourable members, the question is that the next stages of the bill be taken forthwith. All those in favour kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the Belize Companies Amendment Bill 2025. I rise to introduce a bill for an act to amend the Belize Companies Act number 11 of 2022 to provide for the administrative restoration of a company that has been dissolved, to repeal and replace provisions relating to restoration of a dissolved company by the High Court, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, this bill has the recommendation of the Cabinet.
Honourable members, that bill is referred to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for examination, consideration and report.
Bill for an act to amend the Belize Companies Act, Act number 11 of 2022, to provide for the administrative restoration of a company that has been dissolved, to repeal and replace provisions relating to restoration of a dissolved company by the High Court and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order number 49-1, I move that the bill be taken through all its stages forthwith.
Honorable members, the question is that the next stages of the bill be taken forthwith. All those in favor, kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Bill 2025. I rise to introduce a bill for an act governing the insolvency of companies with mechanisms established for insolvent persons to enter into arrangements with their creditors, an administration procedure for companies, the receivership of companies and foreign companies, the liquidation of companies, foreign companies, limited partnerships and partnerships, the making of bankruptcy orders against individuals, the licensing and regulation of insolvency practitioners, the penalization and redress of wrongdoing associated with insolvent persons, the disqualification of directors, the avoidance of certain transactions, cross-border insolvency issues, netting and the establishment of a simplified insolvency procedure for eligible companies, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, this bill has the recommendation of the Cabinet.
Honorable members, that bill is referred to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for examination, consideration, and report.
Bill for an act governing the insolvency of companies with mechanisms established for insolvent persons to enter into arrangements with their creditors, administration procedure for companies, the receivership of companies and foreign companies, the liquidation of companies, foreign companies, limited partnerships and partnerships, the making of bankruptcy orders against individuals, the licensing and regulation of insolvency practitioners, the penalization and redress of wrongdoing associated with insolvent persons, the disqualification of directors, the avoidance of certain transactions, cross-border insolvency issues, netting and the establishment of a simplified insolvency procedure for eligible companies, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade, Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is the National Assembly Powers, Privileges and Immunities Bill 2025. Madam Speaker, I rise to introduce a bill for an act to repeal and replace the Legislative Assembly Powers and Privileges Act to declare and define certain powers, privileges, and immunities of the National Assembly and of the members and officers of such assembly, to secure freedom of speech in the National Assembly, to regulate admittance to the precincts of the National Assembly, to give protection to the persons employed in the publication of the reports and other papers of the National Assembly, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, this bill has the recommendation of the Cabinet.
Honorable members, that bill is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report.
Bill for an act to repeal and replace the Legislative Assembly Powers and Privileges Act to declare and define certain powers, privileges, and immunities of the National Assembly and of the members and officers of such assembly, to secure freedom of speech in the National Assembly, to regulate admittance to the precincts of the National Assembly, to give protection to the persons employed in the publication of the reports and other papers of the National Assembly, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is the National Symbols Bill 2025. Madam Speaker, I rise to introduce a bill for an act to prescribe the national symbols of Belize to regulate the use of the national symbols of Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, this bill has the recommendation of the Cabinet. With your permission, Madam Speaker, I'll just offer a few brief words on the introduction of the bill. The Ministry of Culture, through its primary engine, the National Institute of Culture and History, established under the Niche Act, Chapter 331, as we all know, as all Belizeans know, has really been diligently serving Belize in the promotion and safeguarding of Belize's tangible and intangible national identity and cultural heritage. We all are very proud of Belize's rich culture and history, and we often talk about the unique, the unmistaken uniqueness in the community of nations of our national symbols, or national anthem, or national prayer, or national symbols, the coat of arms, the national coat of arms, the national flower, the national tree, the national animal. But up to now, up to date, we have not enacted any legislation to safeguard this treasured national identity and cultural heritage. So, for example, in countries like Barbados and Trinidad and Singapore, they have in place legislation which safeguards these national treasures, these national symbols. And so that is what this bill is all about. It's really about ensuring that we provide a legal framework that underpins these national symbols, regulating the use of the national symbols, the national anthem, the national prayer, which is not the case currently. Indeed, the current state of the law is such that the government cannot restrict or prohibit the use of the nation's coat of arms by any entity, whether local or foreign. And we've had a few examples, I'm sure others will recall, where people are misusing our national coat of arms for all sorts of purposes. So it's just one reason why we have to do this. As things stand, the only restriction on the use of our national symbols is if someone wanted to register it as its own. So that trademark, copyright, law is the only real protection we have. So in Section 36(1) of the Trademark Act, Chapter 257 of the Laws of Belize, that provides a restriction on the use of our national symbols. But again, as I said, that section only applies to circumstances where a party, somebody is actually trying to register one of those symbols in their name. So, that prevents that, and that's obviously very, very important. So, as such, this section does not provide protection against the use of national symbols unless it is an application to create a trademark. So outside of that, there's no restriction or prohibition on the use of the Belizean flag or other national symbols, so that entities can use the flags really in any way they can, so long as they're not trying to register them. This, we feel, is an untenable state of affairs. There must be some regulatory structure in place for the use of our national symbols, or national anthem or prayer. And that's why we have proposed this bill. And the bill, among other things, Madam Speaker, the design, the description, the words, the lyrics of the national flag, very important. The lyrics, the national anthem, the prayer, the coat of arms, the national symbols are for the first time statutorily specified and declared as set out in the schedule to this bill. So and very importantly, Madam Speaker, the regulation of the use of these is done by declaring that the copyright in the words, the music of the national anthem, which we sing so proudly, design of the national flag, the national coat of arms, is vested in the state in perpetuity. So we're making it very, very clear that it is to the state that these national symbols belong, and copyright is vested in the state. So that essentially, Madam Speaker, is the purpose and objective of the bill. You know, and again, I want to make very clear that, you know, while there are licensing requirements, this will not impact our use of the flag and the symbols in the manner in which we do now. There will be no fees, for example, no limits on how artists and creative people can use the flag and other symbols. But we do want businesses to it's a one-time license, get a license, and you have up to 6 months after the bill is passed to do so. We want to make sure that, you know, that people understand that these are our national symbols, and as much as we take pride in them, we also have an obligation together, a community obligation to make sure that we're safeguarding and protecting these national symbols. So I think it's a very, very important bill, and I think one that we can all celebrate and support because of its stated objective of ensuring that these national symbols are once and for all vested. The legal status of these national symbols are vested in the state forever after today. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, that bill is referred to the Health and Human Development Committee, which includes matters of rural development and culture, for examination, consideration, and report.
Bill for an act to prescribe the national symbols of Belize, to regulate the use of the national symbols of Belize, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
In accordance with Standing Order number 49-1, I move that the bill be taken through all its stages forthwith.
Honorable members, the question is that the next stages of the bill be taken forthwith. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the appointment of the Auditor General motion. Madam Speaker, I move that at its rising today, the House adjourn to a date to be fixed by the Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the House at its rising today adjourn to a date to be fixed by the Speaker. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Public business, government business motions.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister.
Forgive me for getting ahead of myself, Madam Speaker. I'm not used to this spot. Madam Speaker, this is the appointment of Auditor General Motion 2025. Madam Speaker, I move whereas Section 109(1) of the Belize Constitution provides that the Auditor General shall be appointed by the Governor General, acting on the recommendations of both houses of the National Assembly contained in resolutions passed in that behalf. And whereas the post of Auditor General has been vacant since August 31st, 2024, and whereas the government, having recognized that the post of the Auditor General plays a critical role in safeguarding public trust by overseeing the use of taxpayers' monies and preventing misuse of resources, promotes transparency and embodies principles of good governance. And whereas Maria Anel Rodriguez holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of South Wales and a bachelor's of science degree in accounting from the University of Belize. And whereas Maria Anel Rodriguez has considered experience in the Office of the Auditor General and has held senior posts such as Supervisor of Audit and Deputy Auditor General. Now therefore be it resolved that this Honorable House recommends that Maria Anel Rodriguez be appointed as Auditor General effective January 1st, 2025 until July 28, 2047, when she attains the grand age of 65. This motion has the recommendation of the Cabinet.
I recognize Leader of Opposition, Member for Mesopotamia.
Morning, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Morning, colleagues. Morning to the good people of Mesopotamia and all the other 30 constituencies I have the privilege to lead. Madam Speaker, the opposition vehemently objects to the appointment of Ms. Rodriguez as the Auditor General, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this appointment is nothing more than the ultimate highlight of cronyism and is nothing advancements, Madam Speaker. Since we got word of this potential appointment, we have been doing our research, Madam Speaker, and the public officers that have been reaching out, in particular public officers in the office of the Auditor General, they have shared information with the opposition that must be brought to the attention of the public, Madam Speaker. Information that will give rise to all that I have said about nepotism and cronyism and put into question the qualifications of Ms. Rodriguez, Madam Speaker. It starts with illegal promotions. Madam Speaker, there is evidence that Ms. Rodriguez was promoted illegally twice. Now, if something starts wrong, usually it continues wrong and it will only end wrong, Madam Speaker. The Office of the Auditor General has been a problem for this country for quite some time, Madam Speaker. This People's United Party government promised in its manifesto to fix the Office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker, and they have not done that. The country has been, in essence, without a functioning Auditor General for the last 4 years, Madam Speaker. And this attempt to appoint a PUP crony to leave family with the member from Corozal Southeast, from the information that I've gathered, Madam Speaker, but this attempt to promote a PUP crony, Madam Speaker, is not going to fix the problem of the Office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker. Holding governments to account as to how they fix.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Can you do the mic for me? What's the point of order, Honourable Member?
I believe the Leader of the Opposition have his information incorrect. As far as I know, Ms. Rodriguez is not any family member of mine. And she's originally from Corozal Southeast, proudly, and from the Corozal
It's a
district.
point of order, Madam Speaker.
We're correcting you, sir. I know you
Point of
don't
order,
understand
please
it,
educate me.
but,
What's the point of order?
I've
Right.
taken the correction.
but that is the first. That's an I'm from the incorrect Corozal information. district, like I presume the
Madam
rest of
Speaker.
your speech, Leader of the Opposition. Please, you, sir. I know you
Point of
don't
order,
understand
please
it, but,
educate me. What's the point of order?
I've
Right.
taken the correction.
but that is the first. That's an incorrect information, like I presume the rest of your speech, Leader of the Opposition. Please scratch it off the record. And preferably nothing else, because you're wrong.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, may I just remind members do have a duty for statement of facts when you speak. You have an obligation for that in this chamber. Then it has been noted that the Honorable Member disputes the fact that there is no relation. Member, you may continue with your contribution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I said this, the information that was relayed to me, Madam Speaker, and I definitely, the member is from Corozal Southeast, and he has admitted that she's from Corozal Southeast, so your constituent. So yes, so there is a relation there. And that is what I was saying about cronyism. So here is an attempt to advance the member from Corozal Southeast constituent. As I was saying, Madam Speaker. So I still don't know what the point of order is. I know there's a point of order 42B.
Member, are you going to continue?
I am continuing.
Thank you.
And a part of my presentation, Madam Speaker, is that exactly what is happening here is the attempt by this government to continue the dysfunction of the office of the Auditor General. Whether or not it is a family member or a crony, as I have said, Madam Speaker, this is what we need to avoid. Now, Madam Speaker, to me, being affiliated or being a family member to a member of parliament doesn't disqualify you from, excuse me, Madam Speaker, I cannot continue my presentation if we're going to not have adherence to 42B, Madam Speaker.
I'm glad that you were
Well,
aware
yes,
of
I do my
42B.
best to comply.
Yes, member.
I do my best.
It is Friday, and we're starting late. Members, yes, 42B. I'm actually shocked I have to even repeat this after so many meetings. Please, let's hear the member. Any member on their feet, other members should be quiet.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, there are serious questions. There are serious,
Members,
Madam Speaker, on a point of order.
work with me.
Could you strike that from the record, Madam Speaker?
42B, please.
Could you strike that from the record, Madam Speaker? Or you didn't hear him say?
It wasn't on the record. Something that
It's
you've
not on
told
the
me
record?
many times.
Okay, I see we're understanding each other, right, Madam Speaker? The next term is going to be good if you're still the Speaker. If she's still the Speaker,
There's
because
less members, please.
I mean I'm giving a presentation. You just told him 42B and they're
Let's
still
not
talking.
include the role of the chair in your contributions and just continue with your
Thank
contribution.
you, Madam Speaker. But as I was saying, Madam Speaker, cronyism is when you have these types of appointments for such an important office, Madam Speaker, such as the Auditor General, which it is the view of the opposition that this government has deliberately brought to a screeching halt so that there is no oversight, Madam Speaker, so that they can spend the people's money and engage in purported corruption without having to account to the people, Madam Speaker. And how do you do that? Well, you appoint one of your cronies. We saw the other day a CEO being dismissed because the CEO was not going along from all of the reports that we have gotten in the opposition with the status quo, Madam Speaker. But Ms. Rodriguez, Madam Speaker, She was promoted illegally to supervisor of audit. Also, she did not have the required master's degree and got promoted by the commission after obtaining the certified fraud examiner designation, which is a temporary promotion, Madam Speaker, and only lasts for 1 year. So how can she get a permanent promotion based on a temporary qualification, Madam Speaker? That is one thing, Madam Speaker. No.
Members, please, 42B, I kindly ask for the respect of the standing order. As hard as it may be, please, let's just rely on 42B. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I have said things sitting down, and I remember you actually threw me out of the house one time because I refused to withdraw it. And this is the second time that the member from Kayo South has uttered the word lies and lied, Madam Speaker.
Members, can you take your seat, please, and the mic off? I am very acutely aware of that incident, and I believe you reminded me that you did not, you were not asked to leave, and I did not take you out because you confidently stated that you are withdrawing yourself from that sitting. In all seriousness, though, please, we have a long agenda. 42B ought to be respected, and when you don't respect it, you're not only doing an injustice to the chamber, but you're not respecting the chair, and I take issue with it. Please, 42B.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd just like to highlight all the laughing and joking over there. This is what this government takes the Belizean people for, Madam Speaker. They take the people for a joke. They've lied their way to the halls of Parliament and to the cabinet, and they continue to take the people of Belize for a joke, Madam Speaker. Mrs. Bradley, Madam Speaker, submitted, that was the former Auditor General, Madam Speaker. She submitted a letter to the CEO dated November 14th, so she had dates. November 14th, 2014, member from Fort George. Cherry picking Ms. Rodriguez for the promotion to supervisor of audit. At this point, Mrs. Rodriguez was not in possession of the master's degree required for these promotions, Madam Speaker, at the time. This was followed up by a letter from the Ministry of Public Service to a query from a public officer complaining about being superseded by Ms. Rodriguez. And this letter was dated October 27, 2014, stating, in justifying the recommendation in respect of Ms. Rodriguez, the Auditor General submitted that Ms. Rodriguez possessed the following qualifications, namely, certified fraud examiner since January 2013, equivalent to a CPA. Although this certificate expires after 1 year and has to be renewed in order for the individual to remain a certified fraud examiner, this certification is in line with the Finance and Audit Act 2005, Madam Speaker. This is not found anywhere in the Act. Part 3 of the paragraph of this letter that I refer to, 11 to 16, refers to the audit and Auditor General. So this was a blatant lie. According to these complaints, Madam Speaker, about these illegal promotions of Mrs. Rodriguez, Madam Speaker. And this was brought to the attention of the Commission, and the Commission should have been aware that Mrs. Rodriguez or Ms. Rodriguez faced some significant questions as to her qualification, Madam Speaker. And you may ask, what significance does this have? And it is important that, as I said, when you start wrong, you continue wrong, I know you will end wrong because you will be appointing Ms. Rodriguez for until she's 65, which is the next 30 years, Madam Speaker. And what we don't want to have is someone in such a crucial role, Madam Speaker, giving no oversight to governments, Madam Speaker, being unqualified. And what this also does, Madam Speaker, is it demoralizes the public service, the public servants who are qualified and who have done their service to this country, Madam Speaker. When we talk about qualifications, Ms. Rodriguez claims to possess a master's degree in business administration from the University of South Wales, Madam Speaker. But again, this is coming from the public servants that find it outrageous, this act of cronyism, Madam Speaker. The information has been unearthed that the University of South Wales does not have the subject as an online course, Madam Speaker. Students are only accepted from specific countries, and Belize is not on the list, Madam Speaker. The University of South Wales is not on the official list of accredited institutions at the Ministry of Education, Madam Speaker. So we have, Madam Speaker, information such as this being shared by public officers, Madam Speaker, that calls into question not just two illegal promotions, but overall questions of fraud, Madam Speaker, whether the gentle lady even has the master's degree that she claims to possess, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, another clear indication that the present administration has paved the way, paved the road for Mrs. Rodriguez to be the Auditor General is obvious in the advertisement of the vacancy, Madam Speaker. At Section 2, qualifications required, it stated that the candidate had to have served a minimum of 3 years as Deputy Auditor General or equivalent posts. In addition to this, the advertisement did not give any age limit requirement, which is also very abnormal, Madam Speaker. And again, it has to be put on the record, Madam Speaker. I have no axe to grind with Mrs. Rodriguez, Madam Speaker. As I have said, it matters not to me, Madam Speaker, family relation or even political affiliation, as much as it matters qualifications, Madam Speaker. You know, when we were in this honorable house and the United Democratic Party was on that side, I remember the opposition members railing up about the lawyers that were being hired by the government of Belize at that time. And I saw yesterday, Madam Speaker, where the government is being threatened with legal action to hold redistricting, which the opposition fully supports that redistricting should be held before the next general elections. And none other than Amon Courtney is answering for the Attorney General, Madam Speaker.
What does that have to do with?
That has to do with the fact that, Madam Speaker, I appreciate that Amon Courtney is one of the best lawyers in this country, and the government is accepting that they have no confidence in the Attorney General, that they need to hire an outside.
On the Auditor General?
Yes, but
not
I'm
the
just
Attorney
telling you
General
that
motion.
the
Can we
Auditor
continue?
General's family relation or constituency location matters not. It is these questions of qualification and these questions, Madam Speaker, of...
To hear the point of order.
And Madam Speaker, I would ask that we get a point of order and not a dissertation before you say the point of order. Member from...
Last time I checked, I'm still the speaker, so allow me please to hear the point of order and to rule.
Madam Speaker, it is clear that the member
Point of order.
Yes, he's being repetitive, Madam Speaker, repetitive, and contradicting himself. On the one point, he said earlier that he does not agree that they can be constituents, and on the other hand, he says that it's okay for
I
them
did
to
not
be
say that,
competitive.
Madam
He's
Speaker.
being repetitive.
I did not say that, Madam Speaker. On a point of order, can I have the same correction that the member from Kayo Southeast asked for, Madam Speaker?
No, man, no,
I did not
listen,
say that you
listen.
can't be a family member. I said cronyism, Madam Speaker.
Member, gone into some about Attorney General, which has nothing to do. I will ask that you wrap up because you are getting a bit repetitive, but I don't want you to go into a matter that has nothing to do with the bill. And all other members, can we please, let's just try our best to respect the 42B and get through this day.
I will get back into focus, Madam Speaker, but I have no intention of wrapping up until I have been able to share this very important information with the public, Madam Speaker. As I have said, Madam Speaker, the Office of the Auditor General is crucial to fighting against corruption and holding governments accountable, Madam Speaker. And where we have, as I've said, before I was interrupted, Madam Speaker, to continue with my presentation, the road for this Auditor General has been paved from the very beginning. As I said before I was interrupted, the Deputy Auditor General application advertisement, Madam Speaker, made abnormal listings, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, despite the above mention, Madam Speaker, this gentle lady, Mrs. Rodriguez, superseded so many other qualified public officers, Madam Speaker, when she was promoted because they were more qualified than her, Madam Speaker. And this is contrary to the regulations in the Career Development Manual, which states, if a promotion recommended under paragraph 2A involves the supersession of other officers in the department ministry, their names, posts, and salaries should be stated on the back form with brief reasons to justify their supersession, Madam Speaker. In 2016-2017, the then Auditor General, Mrs. Bradley, submitted a request to the Ministry of Finance for the creation of the post for a second Deputy Auditor General, Madam Speaker. It is more than reasonable to assume that one of the justifications would have had to be that the workload was too much for one Auditor General, Madam Speaker. And this is why this was done, Madam Speaker. But what we have to presume with all of the accompanying evidence is these things have been done to put someone in place that by all evidence that the opposition has gathered is not serious, was not serious about holding the government accountable and doing the job of the Office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker. Other complaints that we have received from public servants in the Office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker, and this goes to Mrs. Bradley, who many in the Office of the Auditor General complained that she created a toxic work environment and again brought the Office of the Auditor General to a screeching halt where we saw no reports being given to the public. We saw when there were reports given to the Auditor General, she would deduct information. These are all complaints from members in the Office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker, and the complaints that we are getting now is that Mrs. Rodriguez continues with the same energy, Madam Speaker. Poor administrative skills, and as I said, toxic behavior. She, according to members in the office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker, she has weaponized and continues to weaponize the performance appraisal system. You have different public officers whose names I won't call, but that have been in their career above the grades in the performance appraisal system. Actually, there is a mention here with a permission to reveal the name, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Henry, who is in the office of the Auditor General, whose appraisal grades were 8.5 and 8, but then was assessed with a 1 because of the type of environment that has been created in the office of the Auditor General, Madam Speaker, where these senior members of the office of the Auditor General have been relegated to no task, no assignment, because they refuse to go along with the status quo that is keeping the office of the Auditor General dysfunctional, Madam Speaker. These people that I'm talking about, Mrs. Obermeyer and Mr. Henry, were assigned to report directly to Mrs. Rodriguez as their immediate supervisor, despite the fact that based on the organizational chart, which can be found online at the office official website, their immediate supervisor should have been a supervisor of audit and not the Deputy Auditor General, Madam Speaker. And it was not as though they were conducting any high-profile audit that required direct oversight from a deputy. On the contrary, Madam Speaker, these two officers were instructed by Mrs. Rodriguez not to do any audit-related work from October of 2022, Madam Speaker. Ms. Jennifer Myvitt, who is a supervisor of accounts and assigned under Mr. Selwyn Fuller, was also instructed via email not to do any audit-related work as of October 2022, Madam Speaker. The only posts not related to audit work in the office are administrative officer, finance officer, secretary, IT technician, driver, accounts and registry clerks, gardener and cleaner, Madam Speaker. So to have these senior officers in the Auditor General's office that don't fall under those headings that are not related to audit work, Madam Speaker, be essentially sidelined, Madam Speaker, shows the type of poor administrative capacity that Mrs. Rodriguez has and shows the toxic environment that has been created under Mrs. Bradley and will continue with Mrs. Rodriguez, Madam Speaker. And it is incumbent upon this government to do what it is they promised to do, which is to have a strong and functioning office of the audit. Allow any government to get away with fleecing the people's coffers, Madam Speaker, and Mrs. Rodriguez is not qualified to be the Auditor General, Madam Speaker. Mrs. Rodriguez is a crony, Madam Speaker, and Mrs. Rodriguez will not get the job done. She is being placed there so that this government can continue with its purported malfeasance and corrupt acts, Madam Speaker. This is not going to deliver on their plan, Belize, Madam Speaker, unless their plan was to scam the people of this country, Madam Speaker. We need a strong Auditor General. We need an office of the Auditor General that will be reformed, that will be able to demonstrate efficacy as was promised, Madam Speaker, because the reason we can't pay our teachers and they are protesting. Protesting right now in Belmopan, despite the member from Lekai laughing at me and telling me, oh, you know, I'll get what you want. And certainly it's not what I wanted, Madam Speaker. But the reason we have these things happening in our country is because of corruption, misappropriation of funding, and lack of oversight, which the Office of the Auditor General brings, Madam Speaker, should bring, and has not brought. We had problems in the last administration. This government promised to do that, and this appointment of Mrs. Bradley is anything but that. There will be a revolt in that office, Madam Speaker. The senior members of the public service will revolt against Mrs. Rodriguez, and we will get nowhere as a country as far as accountability, transparency, and the good governance that this PUP government promised, Madam Speaker. For those reasons, the opposition cannot support the appointment of Mrs. Rodriguez. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member for Fort George.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon. Madam Speaker, it is said that a shallow mind and a loud mouth is a dangerous combination. And that's what we saw just now. That's what we witnessed for almost 45 minutes of just pure nonsense being spoken by the leader of the opposition. And while he came in here and talking about or trying to create the impression that the qualifications that Ms. Rodriguez had, he said it's unsubstantiated. But what I can inform the leader of the opposition, that it is a fact that this whole country knows that the doctorate that he claims to have is not in his possession. That he cannot show the country at any point. Want to talk about qualification?
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, I have an honorary doctorate from the University of Liberia, Madam Speaker.
Noted.
Could you please correct the record, Madam Speaker?
Noted.
Madam Speaker, it's also a fact within his own party
Speaker, on a point of
that
order,
they have
Madam
asked
Speaker,
him for his high school
on a point of
diploma,
order,
which
Madam
he cannot
Speaker,
produce as
on a
yet.
point of order,
One
Madam
second.
Speaker.
Can both members please take a seat? Thank you. No member of Mesopotamia. You can take your mic off. No member from Mesopotamia, leader of the opposition. You stood and you made a point, and you stood on your record because your mic was on, that you have an honorary doctorate. The record has reflected. Member for Fort George. No.
Perhaps.
The cross bantering. One second, member. The cross bantering. I get it, right? It's part for the course. But please, it will make it difficult to get through today. Please. You are as guilty for that same thing as the rest on the other side. Member for Fort George. I have spoken. Member for Mesopotamia. Gotten it out of the system. You feel good now? Good. Member for Fort George.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Perhaps he should just look over the nodding heads on his side of the House, where in his party, when we spoke about his high school diploma just now. But, Madam Speaker, it is clear, it is very clear.
My high school diploma.
It is
Again,
very
Madam
clear
Speaker,
that
on a point of order.
the leader
what
of
about
the
my high school
opposition.
diploma?
If you stop, I'm going to ask you to remain seated.
It is very clear that the only objective the leader of the opposition had today was to try to disparage the reputation of a senior public officer who has worked very hard and served this country for a number of years, Madam Speaker. And I cannot understand how it is that he has this track record of continuing to disparage our hard-working public officers.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. The member from Fort George is imputing improper motives. As a member of this House, Madam Speaker, I have a responsibility to share with the public information that has been brought to me by public servants. I have no intention of disparaging Mrs. Rodriguez. This is all facts, and I can share it with you, Madam Speaker.
No. No, I do not take the point that it's imputing improper motives. Member, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. it is a fact that Ms. Rodriguez has held senior posts in the Office of the Auditor General. And I asked him to state the date when she received that promotion, because that promotion happened in 2014 under the UDP government, under a Minister of Finance who was his father. So maybe he should check with the former Prime Minister to see if he was satisfied with the work being done by Ms. Rodriguez at the time. Because as I recall, he was also the Minister of the Public Service at that particular time. So, Madam Speaker, he comes in here and tries to suggest or create the impression that this is being done because it's somebody new. No. Ms. Rodriguez has worked in the Office of the Auditor General for a number of years. She has qualified herself and she applied. Madam Speaker, he spoke about creating a strong Office of the Auditor General. Well, perhaps he should start by trying to create a strong opposition, because he does not even have that. Just for the record, Madam Speaker, let everybody, let the public know, let the country know that the office, when the vacancy was created in the Office of the Auditor General upon the retirement of Ms. Dorothy Bradley, there was the publication and the vacancy was published. The requisite time frame was kept to, and 5 persons applied for the position. Mr. Gerald Henry did not apply. So instead of writing that letter for you, he should have applied if he wanted to be the Auditor General. There was an interview panel that was established consisting of members of the Public Service Commission, from the Office of the Prime Minister, from the Ministry of Public Service, etc. Interviews were done with the persons who applied, and Ms. Rodriguez received the highest score. That is how promotions are done in the public service, Leader of the Opposition. It's not about appointing anyone who just came in. There is a procedure. The procedure was followed, and Ms. Rodriguez received the highest score in that interview panel. So instead of getting a fairy tale from somebody else, you should have learned the facts of how that appointment came about. Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
I recognize the member for Corozal Southeast.
Madam Speaker, quite frankly, I had no intention of making a presentation today in particular with this issue. But I mean, you know, from the very fact that they could come here and say, it's my family, I actually wish, because I know Ms. Rodriguez. She's from... Oh, yes, thank you. I apologize, Member for Colette. Yes, for the member for Mesopotamia. I stand corrected. And I don't want to bring no false allegations or false facts as someone who just did 2 speakers ago, no? Yes, Madam Speaker, I happen to know the family and very well. I know the people in my division. I've tried my best to meet all of them as possible, and I believe that is what has helped me to be successful. But, Madam Speaker, I mean, one cannot help but feel that some of these attacks were just personal. I don't know if I could even say maybe some of it was a little bit misogynistic. But what I can tell you is that in the Corozal Southeast Division, there are very strong women in the Corozal Southeast Division, and wherever they go and they work, they always do a very good and very thorough job, and Mrs. Rodriguez is definitely going to make a good example in that office that she's going to now hold. Madam Speaker, as I know also too, the Senator Tony Herrera is trying to represent Corozal Southeast. I want to see him oppose that when the Senate votes on that bill or on this appointment next week. So I want to see him go against you or go with you there, Leader of the Opposition. So, Madam Speaker, first of all, Ms. Rodriguez is not my family, all right? And actually, I kind of wish she was, because I do know her. I do know the work ethic that she has, and I know the family she comes from. They come from humble cane farmers' roots. They work very hard, get up 4:30 in the morning, go to the cane fields and work, all right? So I know this lady put herself through school. She's done a lot of sacrifices to get where she is, and rather than try to soil her reputation or anything like that, I believe we should be totally proud for this country that we now have a totally qualified person who have a very strong character and will do a very good job as the Auditor General, Madam Speaker. And her qualifications are real. They're not honorary doctorates, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and my apologies for being a bit late. But certainly, Madam Speaker, I was listening to the leader of the, well, one of the leaders of the opposition.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, there is only one leader of the opposition according to the Constitution. No, sometimes I remember you may knock your head when you get in an accident, so I just need to correct you.
It'll be that kind of Friday. Member for Court East, could we just get the mic off? Thank you.
Again, one more last hurrah. All right. I just can't understand this young man to come here with this kind of behavior in this house and to really go after a public service, as public servant, a woman that has served this country well all over these years just because he wants to score some political points. I could imagine, I just hope that women across this country hear how he gone after a good woman, a woman that's well qualified, a woman that went through the process and applied for the job and was given the job not because she's a woman. She got the job because she is the most qualified person.
I never mentioned anything about gender, Madam Speaker. I spoke about cronyism.
He hasn't said that. Yeah, continue.
If he would have followed, if this leader of the opposition, this not for not too long, not sure, Albert, Madam, you want to call it and get it over with? Yeah. If this leader of the opposition,
sorry for the interruption, Prime Minister. 1 second, I'm speaking. Members. You know, this is, members, in all seriousness, I really should be presiding over two sides here, not three. It is uncharted territory. I recognize this. I recognize that this particular meeting will be challenging, but it is not a challenge that is not insurmountable. Please, we're at motion number 1. We have several to go through. So I will ask for your indulgence again, please, I understand the need to stand on point of orders, but they really ought to be real point of orders. I also understand the need for every member having the right to contribute, but not to be purposefully, that's my word, disruptive or intentionally disruptive of the proceedings. I ask that we kindly get through with this first motion. And Prime Minister, I hand back to you to continue your contribution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I see him hurling insults at the honourable member from Albert, it reminds me of a strong woman in his party. What do you refer to her? Miss Petit? Something like that, no? Something like that thing. Refer to him. And I think it's well earned. But Madam Speaker, here he comes to attack this lady just because she can't defend herself in this house. But you know what? We are going to defend her. He accused this lady supposedly about trying to find something, about getting some degree and go through great lengths. A very man that was given an honorary doctorate, he didn't even earn it, he didn't even work for it, he didn't even study for it, and yet he had come and try to attack this lady that worked hard for many years to get that. I don't use it. You see me use it? You ever see me refer to self as doctor? I don't. I don't. I never beg for it. You beg for it. My point, Madam Speaker, this is the point. This lady worked very hard for many years to get where she was, where she is now. And she went through a process. That's the point. The advertisement was made public. If you want to make Mr. Henry apply, you should have better put in your name. But why did Mr. Henry not put in his name? Because he is not qualified. I'm sorry that I have to call out this gentleman. Like, Mr. Henry, me and you get along okay. I won't say we're not friends, but you know, when we meet, we talk well. I think he's a decent man. But when you come and read things that are half-truths and twist it around to try to create as if there's some sinister move to put a highly qualified, belligerent public servant who is a woman, I have a problem with that. All of us here have a problem with that. Even the other side, the bigger side of the opposition, have a problem with that.
Member from Corazana?
No, this man, this honorable member from Mesopotamia now come and try to accuse this government of what? Of trying to steal the people's money and trying to spend money, the people's money without proper accountability and so forth. It is no other than his father that was taken to the Supreme Court. Now who is the what they call now, the High Court, was found guilty of spending more than $1.5 billion without the paper without this House giving the authorization, Madam Speaker. $1.5 billion. He was found guilty, and now you come and try to attack this government. But you're a real mispetty for true boy. Manners. My God. My God.
What can you expect? 10 years at the University of Clinton.
No, members. No, honorable member for Orange. Members. Whoa. No. Member for... I need to take a few minutes recess. This is deplorable. Member for Mesopotamia, your words, while not on record, is deplorable. Members on the government side, I'm going to appeal to your good senses, please. We need to get through today, but this hurdling of remarks, disparaging and otherwise, cannot continue. I'm going to take a short recess and we will resume. When we resume, it's the Prime Minister to continue his contribution.
Keep the fire blazing. Crime 96, the fire blaze. It's a sign. Aim in the belly is the whole globe as a Crime 96.5. See.
The River Valley Foundation presents the 10th annual Boom Run, and it's happening at the Castleton Park, Borough Boom Village, Sunday, February 23rd.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Take part in the Boom Circuit 5, 10, and 15K with great special prizes for each category and special prizes for